I have a wonderful guest. I'm really delighted to have Bea with me. Bea, would you mind introducing yourself?
Thank you, Matt, for inviting me on here to talk to you about my favorite thing, which are stories on so many different levels. My name is Bea Gonzalez. I am, I guess, primarily a writer of mostly novels. That's what I've published. I recently released, after many years of sort of being really disengaged from my own writing, I released a new novel called Invocation that brings together all of the ideas I've been working with in last 18 years, whether it's Joseph Campbell or Carl Jung, Ian McGilchrist, who's become a really big influence. There's so many people. But I'm also associated with something called Sophia Cycles, which is, I don't know what I would call it. I would call it a project. I was crazy about the Jungian works and his theories. My analyst, who's brilliant, said to me, Bea, what you really need to do is you need to get people together to talk about this stuff, because that's what you're trying to do with me. For 3 years, you've come in here and all you want to do is talk about these ideas that are kind of putting your brain on fire. And it has a social media component, which is probably how you found me. My Twitter handle, my Instagram, my Facebook, it's all Sophia Cycles. My original intention was to actually categorize or find a system of classification for all my notes. And I thought, oh, if I put it on Twitter, because I thought, nobody's going to follow an account that's actually, tweeting about, sayings by Jung. I am disturbed by the conversations that are happening on social media. It's the idea of trying to change a conversation. And how do you do it? Well, you don't do it by beating people over with a stick. You might want to present other ideas. I rarely get into arguments with people on social media. I don't think they're useful. So I generally say, look, read the book. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get you to read the book.
That is where I came across you because
Okay.
there's just a wonderful flow of deep and positive information coming out of your Twitter account, which is where I first
Right,
encountered
right.
you, and
Okay.
then saw your website. And it's just so
Mhm.
refreshing to have something with depth on a forum that can be the complete opposites.
Right.
Really glad.
Well, that's exactly why I joined.
Oh yeah, you don't know about these. I'm trying to fix this. It's got an offline 243 error, and I don't know. I don't really know what that is. So.
No, we were talking earlier about Dostoevsky, weren't we?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky, born 1821, died 1881.
Yeah.
Just interesting, that stuff about him being exiled in Siberia for 4 years, wasn't it?
Oh. No, I don't know much about that. I didn't cover it really.
All it is he was a member of a secret political party, and they put him in a Siberian labour camp for 4 years. So, you know.
But hang on, I read about it in. He wrote House of the Dead, and I think he put all his memoirs in that. Didn't he?
Yep. Oh.
When you asked me to tell a story, I thought, okay, well, what has impacted me the most in my life? And in fact, what's impacted me the most in my life are books, just generally. But why? So I was born in Spain, and I immigrated to Canada when I was fairly young. I was about 7. And anybody who's an immigrant will understand that when they arrive in a new country, they don't understand the language. You feel very alienated. I was a weird, nerdy kid, right? And I read all the time, so I had no friends. And so those books were absolutely not only important to me because they kept me occupied, but they actually kind of saved my life. Because when you're very isolated, I think that they can be a substitute. And I think from very early on, I thought this is what I want to do. Somehow, I want to bring in books into my life. And this is going to lead me to the central story of a particular book that I hope it's certainly impacted me quite a bit. When I was a graduate student in England, the residence I was living in was an international students residence, and I gravitated towards the Spanish speakers because I so miss speaking Spanish. And yeah, frankly, the Latin American students had better parties. The kids from Spain, I were connecting to me to the country that I was born in. But there was one guy who would not befriend me. I mean, and I'm pretty friendly, right? I was getting a little bit annoyed. I'm thinking, why is this guy avoiding me? He was from Mexico, and he was doing a PhD in chemistry at Imperial College at the time. And whenever I got in the room, he would turn away, and I think, okay, what has happened here? Anyway, I wore him down. I basically, became his friend by sheer Like I wouldn't leave him alone. I wanted to figure out, and we were all political. I think everybody is in university. And he later confessed sheepishly to me that when he heard me speak in English, he thought I was American. And when he heard me speak in Spanish, he knew I was from Spain, and that those two countries were top of his list of really bad players in Mexico, which, hey, I can totally get. But it was a good lesson for him because, as he said, I was ready to write you off, and this was ridiculous because we became very good friends. So he finished his PhD before I finished my master's, and he was on his way back to Mexico. He was big revolutionary to change the Mexico and make it more progressive. And we gave him a party. And at the end of the night, he took me aside and said, look, I'm going to give you the biggest gift a Mexican can give to anybody. And I said, oh, yeah, okay. It was a book, a novel by a writer that very few people have heard of, but who was so important to the other writers who followed him. His name is Juan Rulfo. He wrote a book called Pedro Paramo. Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Carlos Fuentes, all of the people you will have heard of credit this one book as being sort of the thing that ignited the Latin American boom of literature that I was really influenced by, because I love Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And so I took this book and I was blown away. I thought, wait, how come people don't even know about this book? Kept it. And now we fast forward. I published my first novel. We fast forward about 12 years, and I'm involved with a program that basically hires me to lead tours, literary tours. So I did a couple in Spain, one on Lorca and Sevilla, and a couple of other ones. And then he said, do you want to do one to Mexico? And this is for very small groups of really geeky people who love books, right? I mean, otherwise you wouldn't join these kinds of things. So I said, okay, yeah, Mexico. I had gone to the Yucatan to really basically researched my second novel, which is set in the Yucatan partially. So let's go to the Yucatan. And she said, well, what book should they read? And I said, well, I'm going to suggest a book that's a difficult read because you are in this world where it's ghostly. You don't know where you are. I mean, you have to work your way through it, although it's beautiful. So we assigned that book. And the idea is you go on these tours and we have local guides and we do a little bit of history. I would give some history talks. And then in the afternoon, this is sacred time. For 2 to 3 hours, we sit around at a courtyard. In Sevilla was Lorca, imagine, really hard life. And then in the Yucatan, it was Juan Rulfo. I mean, it's so beautiful. You're with adults who love literature, who are willing to not be the sage on this. Nobody's an expert. We're just kind of exploring together. It's a really, really beautiful program. So I had gotten very close to the local guide. His name was Braulio. He was a lovely man and young man. And he said to me, he would take us everywhere. And of course, we were a group of people that asked him a million questions. So he would say, wow, you guys are really intense. So he took me aside one day because he spoke Spanish to me. And he said, look, I just want to know, what are you guys up to in the afternoons when you kind of tell me to go have my coffee? What are you guys discussing? And so I said, well, we're discussing a book that influenced so many people in this region, and not only your country, but, Colombia, blah, blah. And he hadn't heard of it. And he was trained to be a tour guide at the local university. And he said, oh, I'm really embarrassed. I haven't heard it. But he said, look, I'd really love to participate in the conversation. I said, yeah, but the rule is, right, that you have to read the book. You can't just jump in. But I had the book, copy of the book, that my friend Jesus had given to me in England. And I said, guess what? I've got a Spanish language version of this book that comes all the way from England. I said, I'm going to give it to you. If you can actually finish it from here till the last day that we discuss it, you can jump in. So of course we lost our local guide because he would drop us off and then go back to the book. Long and the short of it is that he participated in the last talk, the discussion we had, which was fabulous because it's so much more interesting to get feedback from somebody who comes from the country. But also when I left, he hugged me and he said, thank you for giving me the gift of Mexico back.
What did he mean by that? And how did you feel in that moment?
Well, I felt fantastic because it was the gift that had been given to me. I mean, the way I had told him, the reason he said that to me is I said, this book was given to me in London by a Mexican person who believed that this represented Mexico more clearly, the soul of Mexico, more than any book I could read, whether it was, a book of history or whatever. He was trying to tell me that this is actually the soul of Mexico. And Braulio, who hadn't read it, until he read it, he didn't understand what that meant. So I think what he was saying is somehow this book landed in my hands, not through the normal way, which would be university. It would be I read something. It came from a recommendation that was given to you about this country. Now you're in my country, right? Leading people around. And somehow this book is like the connector that comes there. And honestly, Jesus was my introduction to Mexico. I wouldn't have maybe connected to Mexico on the level that I did had I not met Jesus, because, there are many countries and, I'm interested in a lot of things, but it was through him talking about Mexico that I was first intrigued. And then secondly, that book leading me then to I had already read Marquez by that time, but understanding the importance of that particular book to writers who actually made me want to be a writer. These are the writers that I read and thought, oh my God, what I really want to do is tell stories. And so I think when Bradley said that, he was saying, yeah, you've reconnected me through the vehicle of this book to a part of Mexico I wasn't aware of. And that's just really cool. I mean, a book can do that.
Is that a book, Jeremy?
Yes, it's a book. Why shouldn't it be a book?
Why do you have it?
I'm going to read it, Mark.
You're going to read a book? You hate reading.
No, I don't. I love reading. I read Mr. Nice 4 times. I'm going to read all of this book from page 1 to... oh, shit. 372?
I know a lot of people don't place a lot of stock in books and novels and whatever, but they can connect you in ways that I don't think anything else personally has connected me quite as deeply, because a lot of the friendships I've made have been through a shared love of a writer like Jung, or a shared love of literature of some way. All my life keeps going back to a book of some sort. Either I'm writing it or I'm reading it, or more importantly, because I really, really, really value this above all, conversation, or we're talking about it. Somebody has changed our mind enough, or maybe intrigued us enough that we'll sit and have a conversation with a person that we don't know, or that like I'm having with you, or, with people you meet, they might have nothing in common, you think, but through the vehicle of that book, something opens up.
A book? What do you want a book for?
To read.
To read? Why would you want to read when you got the television set sitting right in front of you? There's nothing you can get from a book that you can't get from a television faster.
Get out of the way.
Do you think that books have a special place because it's that investment? You sit with it, it's in your imagination, you're also holding it in the real world?
Yeah, the way I can look at it is it engages your inner life. Like what we're all trying to find is a connection to our inner life. A book makes you work harder than something on Netflix, right? You've got to visualize a little bit more. You've got to interact with it in a different way. So of course, there's many types of books, and some books that you would say, well, maybe you're not doing that. But good literature, I think, makes you engage with it. It's often very philosophical. A lot of the writers I like, from Dostoevsky to, my God, go back to the classical Greeks. They're incredible. They're really kind of challenging what you're the way you see the world. They're giving a different perspective, and that's why it's so powerful. But it goes beyond books. It is storytelling, right? It's the idea that the books contain stories. And then if I look at it, our lives, we're constantly storytelling. We're constantly creating narratives about who we are and what we do and what we believe. And so if I look at the whole world, I always say we're always telling a story. And then the second thing I say, check the story you're telling, right? Because I think a lot of the problems we're seeing out there is people are telling some very nasty stories to each other and about themselves, to themselves.
I do wonder about the loss of that time sitting with the book as a culture, because it's almost now out of fashion to, like you were saying, to take this time to retreat and to sit with something for a long period of time. I don't know. Do you think that we just need to adapt to how people are telling stories now? It's more instant. It's instantly available. You can listen to 4 billion stories in a day.
And I do sometimes. That seems well, okay. So there's a couple of things here. I think that there is a lot of value to not only reading, but to discussing. I really think it makes a big difference to have a group of people get together and work through a story using something like the Socratic method, where you're not going off page and talking about your life suddenly, but really focusing on what is this writer trying to tell us and why does it matter, right? The act of now talking about it with other people who are giving me their perspective, honestly, that just enlarges the world. It makes that book so much more relevant to me. And it's not, again, I love listening to lectures. I probably listen to more lectures than anyone, in the sense that I'm constantly walking around listening to something on YouTube, some professor but that's a different experience. I think in the act of sharing your ideas about a book or what you've gleaned from it, you're kind of revealing a lot about yourself, because what you notice, and by the way, I learned that through doing book groups. When I published my books, I'd be invited to do book clubs. And it always fascinated me what people were noticing about my books, because it wasn't really anything about me. It was really telling me where they were coming from. When people are saying, hey, I noticed this, and I really like that character, and I think, that's interesting. That character was there for 3 pages. Why did you notice? So then the reason, the gift that the reader can give back to the writer is they're noticing certain things, or they've noticed things that you've put in the book and you didn't realize. So a lot of what you're writing is actually very unconscious. You don't even know where it's coming from, right? So you may be telling a story you think is one thing, but can be read in a totally different way. So there's the gift that the reader gives back. But do you write for that? No. You just write because that's, hey, I love books. I love reading. You have to justify your existence. What else am I going to do? And so I said, but really it's because the story will follow you around. And in the case of the last book, I just couldn't get it out of my head.
Everybody has one novel in them, and this is mine.
And this is mine. My magnificent octopus.
This is your novel, Boric?
Yeah, I can't stand long books.
Once upon a time, there was a lovely little sausage called Boric. And it lived happily ever after.
It's semi-autobiographical.
And it's completely, utterly awful.
What I studied at university level was literature and history. So studying literature, which is definitely stories, but I also loved history, which are stories as well. They're imposed narratives on facts, right? You have a bunch of facts and you have to actually create a story around them, or else they're just facts. So both of them are sort of the same kind of thing in different ways. I'm sure historians would argue, but I'd say no, because you can have Marxist historians, you have feminist historians. You can look at it, the lens that you apply to analysis is actually what's making the story, right? So I could almost argue that that's basic. We're living in a world full of stories, but we're just probably not aware that we are. And one of the ways we do this is by, and I love cognitive science to this because they'll tell you this, is what stories are we telling and how are we telling them, right? Because you and I may witness the same thing, and this happens in legal cases all the time, right? And we will we'll give a different version of that happening. That's what makes it very difficult. And so I go back as Ben Okri. He's fantastic, the Nigerian writer, who says, beware of the stories you tell. They can poison the world, or they can do either. They can poison the world, or they can actually bring it back to life. So I guess the question I have for everybody who's writing, are you engaging in poison, more poisoning, or are we engaging in revivification, trying to remythologize the world in a way that we can live better in it? And that's a hard question because, some of our toughest stories feel like poison, but they're actually really good to get your emotions to connect, if that makes any sense. I remember a long time ago when they were producing and I was watching the Star Wars series. I mean, people would get dressed up and stand outside for how many hours? That's storytelling. You don't do that for the report of, business A or B. You stand out because you want to know what happens with Darth Vader. And so to me, that's a proof that we are really governed. Our life feels better when we're hearing these things, I think. There's not been a time in human history where people have not told stories. So what form it's in, I think it's like, it doesn't matter. It's a delivery system, right? Whether it's hardbacks or electronically, or they get dumped on us from some weird AI way that shows up in our eyes. I think that the actual telling stories is healing. In fact, may I tell you about one of the people I met when I was in London was a person who became a very good friend. He was a psychiatrist, and he meets with people, patients, and they read a story together. They read Tolstoy, or they read The Great Gatsby, and they discuss that book, and that is the therapy. And I thought about that, and I thought, this is brilliant. Why? Because it allows you, for many people, it allows them the distance, right? To discuss, and this is something I'm really interested in, bibliotherapy. The idea that I read so much that people will ask me, what book should I read? And they'll privately message me, and I'll say, okay, well, listen, what's the deal? What's happening with you? And they'll say, well, it's a relationship issue. So I said, here's the book you need to pick up. In the speaking about something without speaking about it directly, it is interesting that I think people recognize themselves unconsciously. This is why I always pay attention to people's favorite books. I want to know because that's going to tell me a little bit about their psychology, right? And by the way, I love music. I love other things. It's not like you can't only do it but for me, I'm a word person, right? I'm not trying to say that this is the only way. I'm saying that I'm not talented enough to do the music side. I greatly admire it. This is the thing that chose me, and I chose it, or something happened. Books are the things that have always been there, but it's what's inside there. So then books can change, the format can change, but I'm telling you, this is our ability to tell stories keeps us sane. I'm convinced of this.
The Good Book on tape Ooh, it's read by Larry King.
Hi, I'm Larry King. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without Zaire begat Phineas. Phineas begat Abushua. And Abushua begat Ahimaaz. Ahimaaz begat Amariah onward. Amariah begats Ahitub. Ahitub begat Shalom begat Hilkiah.
I have to tell you, I was one of the people who, when Kindle showed up or the electronic version, I was so happy. It's like all my life I dreamed I could just get a book instantly. I'm very greedy and I want books. Like if I hear about a book, I want it. And the idea that I could just buy it and download it, that was a big deal for me. I'm actually of the belief that, look, if you can get the writer's work, a writer's work shouldn't disappear because it goes out of print, which most of our books go out of print, right? It should be somewhere because maybe someone down the line needs that book. So let's make it all available. I know that there's a lot of arguing about this, but to me, it's like, yeah, electronic versions allow books to survive forever. Or it can even be with a lot of people listening to audio because they love the voice. I mean, I love audio. I don't know about you, but I love having a writer read me because that's what we used to do. I remember going to see Carlos Fuentes read his work. And I thought, wow, it's like really a different thing to hear the writer read with their own inflection, with whatever they want to put into it, or Peter Carey, who I saw as well read. But now you're getting it, you can get it, and I think there's so many ways to tell stories. There's so many delivery systems. I would say the important thing is the story. I don't care how you take it. Don't leave the house without one, because at the end of the day, I mean, what will you do if you don't do that? You're going to pick up Twitter, or you're going to scroll through a bunch of people insulting each other. It's going to make you absolutely sick. I think that's what's psychologically hurting us, honestly. And so the only way to counter the narrative is with better narratives, and stories can actually build a lot of tolerance. And I'm really into that because I think that's one of the big questions of our time. Can we build tolerance and for the other perspective, even though the other perspective is difficult? Can we build tolerance for other types of people? I mean, people who think differently. We've got a huge problem all over the world. I know you're sitting in the States, and I think it's often talked about in the States, but I think it's everywhere, and it always has been. It's been given a megaphone because we're living at a time when everything is amplified. I will continue, crazily or not, to believe in the power of being redeemed by a better story than the one I'm living or the one I'm seeing. There has to be, otherwise there's no hope.
Well, I'm right with you. And while humans are still enjoying book form, they should buy yours and read it.